Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're unpacking a truly intense, cyclical era of retaliation and covert operations between Israel and the PLO in Lebanon, spanning from 1978 to 1982. It's a period literally defined by high-stakes espionage, rapidly shifting military tactics, and some profound internal conflicts that fundamentally changed the course of history in the Middle East.
Here's our roadmap for today. We're going to hit 6 key areas: the coastal road attack, Operation Litani and its fallout, the pivot to covert assassinations, the tragic Nahariya escalation, the fierce internal military friction it sparked, and finally, the incredible story of the aborted Operation Olympia.
All right, Section 1, the coastal road attack, how one devastating strike triggered a massive retaliation. We're starting in early 1978. It's a period marked by incredibly high-stakes intelligence and an impending conflict that would set off a brutal chain reaction. Early in March, Israel's internal security service, Shin Bet, gets this highly sensitive intel from a source code-named Housemaid. It details a massive, impending attack planned by top PLO officials, specifically Abu Jihad, and executed by Azmi Zuhayar. The intel was so precise it even pinpointed militant bases near Damour, Lebanon. So on March 5th, the IDF hits back with a preemptive strike. But here's the kicker. Military intelligence actually wanted a second, larger strike to completely neutralize the threat, while the defense minister steps in and blocks it. Why? Because the U.S. Defense Secretary was visiting and they didn't want to disrupt the schedule. That single decision left the door wide open for what happened just 6 days later, on March 11th. And the human cost of that open door? 48 lives. On March 11th, a PLO squad lands on an Israeli beach in rubber boats. Their very first victim is an American photographer, Gail Rubin, who was literally just out there taking pictures of migrating birds. After taking her life, they hit the highway, hijack a taxi, and then take over a crowded civilian bus headed for Tel Aviv. What follows is a completely chaotic, terrifying pursuit by security forces, ending in a massive firefight. In the madness, the militants detonate a hand grenade inside the bus. 48 civilians were killed. That includes 38 Israelis and, heartbreakingly, 13 innocent children. The entire nation was just shattered. And the mastermind? A dying militant at the hospital confessed it was Abu Jihad.
Moving to Section 2, Operation Litani and Retaliation, the overt military response and its massive consequences.
You can imagine the Israeli public was demanding action, and the defense establishment delivered a swift, uncompromising response. Just 3 days after the hijacking, on March 14th, the IDF launches Operation Litani. It's a massive push. Israeli forces and paratroopers cross straight into southern Lebanon, pushing deep into PLO strongholds. The scale is huge. Around 300 militants are killed, and major headquarters and weapon caches are totally wiped out. But overt military action like this, it brings immediate, heavy geopolitical consequences. The sheer scale of destruction and loss of life triggered intense international media scrutiny. In fact, it led directly to the UN deploying UNIFIL forces to the region. And did it stop the violence? Not at all. The PLO immediately retaliated by firing a barrage of Katyusha rockets right back into Israel. The cycle was just spinning faster.
Which brings us to Section 3, the shift to covert assassinations, changing tactics to avoid global scrutiny.
Because of all that intense heat from the international media over Operation Litani, the Israeli military realizes they have to completely change their playbook. The overt invasions just weren't working politically anymore. They needed a new way to strike back. Enter Rafael, Eitan, the newly appointed IDF chief of staff. To avoid the international backlash and keep operations completely deniable, he makes a drastic pivot. He tasks Flotilla 13, Israel's elite naval commandos, with strictly covert, targeted operations. Eitan was notoriously tough. He hated political red tape, and he pushed his men to their absolute limits. He wanted a unit that could strike silently from the sea, eliminate targets, and just vanish before the media or international bodies even knew what hit them.
And their efficiency? Absolutely staggering. Between 1978 and 1980, this unit pulled off 23 highly classified military raids into Lebanon from the sea. They were ruthlessly effective, resulting in 130 militants killed and another 100 injured. Through these seaborne operations, Israel essentially tightened its grip on PLO activities without ever launching another headline-grabbing invasion. They even managed to track down and eliminate Azmi Zuhayar, the very man who had commanded that horrific coastal road bus attack.
All right, Section 4. The Nahariya attack escalation. How further violence sparked unregulated responses.
But as is so often the case here, the cycle of violence just keeps spinning. In April 1979, we see a devastating escalation that pushes the Israeli defense establishment to basically tear up its own rulebook. On the night of April 22nd, PLO militants infiltrate the coastal city of Nahariya. They storm an apartment building, taking a father and his young daughter hostage, literally using them as human shields during a shootout with the police. Tragically, a militant murdered both the father and the daughter right there on the beach. And in the absolute chaos of it all, a second daughter, just 2 years old, died while her mother was desperately trying to keep her quiet while hiding from the attackers. The shockwave from this, especially the deaths of 2 tiny children, completely shattered any remaining restraint within certain fractions of the military command.
The retaliation was direct, and it went completely off the books. Chief of Staff Rafael Eitan decides to bypass all standard investigations and protocols. He tasks Colonel Meir Dagan with putting together the South Lebanon Region, or SLR unit. Now this is crucial. This wasn't a standard military outfit. It was a completely unregulated, unapproved, top-secret hit squad designed to execute covert assassinations inside Lebanon. No sign-off from the defense minister, no knowledge from the prime minister. Dagan recruits agents, deploys them across Lebanon, and essentially turns the region into a landscape of targeted car bombs and booby traps aimed at PLO officials, operating entirely in the shadows.
This leads right into Section 5, Internal Military Friction, the battle within the Israeli defense establishment.
Because here's the thing, these covert operations didn't just target the PLO. They ignited a massive internal war within Israel's own leadership. It's a stark ideological and operational split. On one side, you have Eitan, Dagan, and Major General Avigdor Ben-Gal of the Northern Command. They genuinely believe that throwing out the rulebook and utilizing completely unregulated covert assassinations was the only way to win. But on the exact opposite side, you've got Yehoshua Sagi, the head of military intelligence, and Prime Minister Menachem Begin. They are absolutely alarmed. They're demanding strict governmental oversight, adherence to the chain of command, and they're definitely not okay with military officers running rogue bombing campaigns in a neighboring country.
And this friction, it boils over completely. It gets to the point where Sagi is so suspicious of the Northern Command, he actually secretly wiretaps General Ben-Gal's phones just to figure out what the SLR unit is doing. Let that sink in for a second. The tension finally explodes publicly in June 1979. An unapproved car bomb in southern Lebanon inadvertently kills civilians instead of the intended PLO targets. When the reports reach the government, a furious Prime Minister Begin summons Eitan for a highly tense meeting. Begin asks him point blank, do these operations in Lebanon have official approval? And Eitan looks the Prime Minister right in the eye and falsely claims that they do. Because Begin trusted his military chief, he dropped the inquiry. And just like that, Dagan's secret operations were allowed to quietly continue.
Finally, Section 6, the aborted Operation Olympia. A massive plot derailed by internal discord. All this deep-seated distrust and internal power struggling ultimately derailed what would have been one of the most ambitious and deadly covert plots of the entire era, Operation Olympia 2, meticulously planned for January 1982. Meir Dagan gets intel that the entire PLO leadership is going to gather at a stadium in Beirut for an anniversary celebration. So, his team devises a devastating 3-step plan. Step 1, undercover agents successfully sneak into the stadium's VIP area days in advance. Step 2, they wire massive amounts of remote-controlled explosives directly under the seats reserved for the PLO High Command. And Step 3, just to be absolutely certain, they prep a truck and 2 cars loaded with over 500 kilograms of explosives parked right outside. It was designed to wipe out the organization's leadership in a single push of a button.
But the internal friction strikes again. Military intelligence head Yehoshua Sagi uncovers the plot, bypasses Eitan completely, and runs straight to the civilian government. When Prime Minister Begin finds out, he demands a meeting and at the very last minute pulls the plug. He aborts the entire mission. Why? Because he was handed intelligence claiming that Soviet diplomats were going to be sitting in that VIP section, and he was absolutely terrified of the international fallout of assassinating USSR officials. Now, here is the absolute tragedy of that cancellation. The intelligence was completely false. There were 0 foreign diplomats present at that event that day. Not one. That single flawed piece of misinformation didn't just stop Operation Olympia dead in its tracks. It handed the PLO leadership a crucial lifeline, a lifeline that ensured they would remain a formidable adversary for years to come.
The sheer weight of that missed opportunity really is staggering, isn't it? It brings this entire era into sharp focus. From the heartbreaking tragedy on the coastal road to the rogue shadow wars of the SLR unit, this battle wasn't just fought on the shores of Lebanon.
It was fought right inside the briefing rooms of Tel Aviv, leaving us with one massive, lingering question. How did a single aborted mission, born from internal military friction and a fateful piece of bad intelligence, permanently reshape the bloody history of the Middle East? Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and as always, keep questioning the history behind the headlines.